Hi, I'm Jon Delano, Money and Politics Editor at KDKA Television, CBS Pittsburgh. And our very special guest today is the Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. Governor, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
You know, just a few hours after you were sworn in office, you were here at KDK Studios. We had a chance to sit down and talk. And there were a couple issues that we talked about. I'm going to come back and ask you about those in a few minutes.
Sure.
But let me just ask you right off the bat, as you finish up your nearly first year in office, what do you consider your greatest accomplishment as governor of Pennsylvania?
Look, I always hate to sort of single out one thing. I think in general, we're getting government working again. We're delivering for the good people of Pennsylvania, investing in education, public safety, economic opportunity. And when we've been confronted with real challenges, whether it's the train derailment in East Palestine right over the border in Beaver County, or whether it's I-95 on the other side of the state, quite literally collapsing. When the experts said it would take months to reopen, we did it in 12 days. We're showing that we can put points on the board every day for the good people of Pennsylvania and get things done and deal with big crises and handle them effectively. So I suppose the one thing is really just making government work for people. And you know, we live by 3 letters every day in my administration: GSD, get, you know, it's a family program.
Stuff.
Get stuff done.
Yeah, I know what the other word is.
Right. That's what we're most proud of. We get stuff done for the good people of Pennsylvania.
Have you been surprised by the number of emergency situations that you've had to deal with?
I mean, you never have any of this stuff on your bingo card, right? But you're prepared for it. We game stuff out all the time. We're constantly working with our emergency management folks. We coordinate with other levels of government. So we're prepared when emergencies strike. And I've got a great team around me of public safety personnel, my chief of staff and others who know how to get the job done under really difficult circumstances. And so you may be surprised by the specifics of what the emergency is, but you're always prepared for an emergency.
What's been your biggest disappointment this year as governor?
I don't know if it's a disappointment as much as I know we've got some unfinished business to do. And that's a product, I think, in many ways of the fact that I'm the only governor in the nation, the only one with a divided legislature, meaning I've got one chamber run by Democrats, the other by Republicans. And so I'm an aggressive guy. I've got that GSD attitude. I want to get 1 million things done. And, you know, sometimes given their divisions, they work at a bit of a slower pace. So I consider that less of a disappointment and more of just some unfinished business we've got to work on.
Well, that was actually one of the questions I had on my list here. So let's move to that right away, because as you know, a number of Harrisburg Republicans have suggested that you're one of the most non-productive, ineffective governors in the last 50 years, essentially citing an inability to bring compromise between the House Democrats, who control the House, and the Republicans who control the state Senate. I'm sure that's not how you would characterize it, but it has been difficult to forge compromise, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, I'm the only governor in the nation with a full-time divided legislature, now with a divided legislature. And I get that there are some people on the other side who exist just to bust my chops, right? That's sort of the way politics works. I understand that. And honestly, I don't pay any attention to that. I kind of ignore it. And you know what? The good people of Pennsylvania ignore that. You know, if you think back to our elementary school days and you learn about how a bill becomes a law, it's got to pass in the House, pass in the Senate in identical forms, then come to the governor for his signature. Well, I can't pass bills that don't get to my desk. And I say that, John, because these leaders, Republican and Democrat, have a responsibility to learn how to work together, to be productive, to actually show up and have legislative session more than what they've been doing over the first year. I've laid out an aggressive agenda. I've put my cards on the table and told them where I think we need to go. Now, notwithstanding how relatively slow they've been to get bills to my desk, we've gotten a hell of a lot done. Just consider a few things. I'm sure you'll want to dive deeper into some of this stuff, but we funded our public education system as a result of bipartisan compromise at the highest level in the history of Pennsylvania. We funded, for the first time ever, universal free breakfast, meaning when a kid goes to school in Pittsburgh or other communities across Western Pennsylvania, they're now learning on a full belly because of that bipartisan compromise. I campaigned on the right of people to both be safe and feel safe, investing more in public safety. And we funded my initiative for 400 new state troopers. I talked about how we've got to create jobs and economic opportunity, and what I asked for on the economic development side, we were able to forge with bipartisan consensus. And when I talked about how our seniors were routinely getting left behind and how we need to give our seniors a tax cut, I was able to forge bipartisan compromise and deliver the largest targeted tax cut for seniors in 2 decades. Seniors are going to start seeing that tax cut next year. So I get that some want to chirp at me from the other side. No problem. I'm a big boy. I can take it. But if you just look at the amount of points we've put on the board in my first year, you can see the effect of me bringing Democrats and Republicans together to get things done.
School choice.
I'll come to that one sec. Last thing I want to say is this, John, respectfully, I didn't mean to cut you off. They got to learn to work more effectively together, Democrats and Republicans. And I get that sometimes it makes them feel better to point fingers at me, but the reality is they got to show up for work. They got to work effectively together. We've seen some positive steps in that direction, and I'm hopeful next year we'll see even more.
You had a very modest school choice plan that you had campaigned on.
Yep.
You couldn't get your own Democrats in the House on board with a compromised version of this. That disappointed you?
It did, but it's what I put in the category of unfinished business. Let me explain. Yeah, I talked before about being the only governor in the nation with a divided legislature. That means we've got to work in a bipartisan manner. Democrats and Republicans have to vote for stuff. And when you work in a bipartisan manner, John, everybody can get 100% of what they want. Right. And so if you're not getting 100%, you can't just take your ball and go home. I'm constantly chipping away for the good people of Pennsylvania to get 40, 50, 60, 70% of progress, and then I'll come back the next day and get the remainder. One of those areas is, I believe, every child of God deserves an opportunity to get a quality education. And for poor kids in struggling school districts, especially children of color, I think it's really important that we give their parents the opportunity to have more resources for their kids. Now, what does more resources mean? Maybe more tutoring, a laptop, books, the things they need as study aids, or maybe it means going to a different school. I want that opportunity for those children. And yes, it's something that the Republicans and I agree on. And it's something that I've got to work and others have to work to bring more Democrats along. That's an example of the kind of governor I'm trying to be. Work with both sides, bring people together, not just sort of be beholden to one particular ideology or orthodoxy, but do what I think is right for the people of Pennsylvania and advance the ball for them. And this is what I consider to be a piece of unfinished business. Other unfinished business, we got to raise the minimum wage in Pennsylvania. And the House passed that and the Senate didn't do anything on it. Other things that are considered unfinished business. The House passed some important legislation to make sure we combat gun violence in our communities while still respecting Second Amendment rights. Senate hasn't moved on that. Those are examples of bills I want to see that have moved in one chamber but not the other. We got to get those to my desk. So some of them can chirp and say, well, he hasn't signed more bills. Well, you know what? They got bills sitting in their chambers that they got to work on and get to my desk.
Fair enough. When we met a year ago in this studio, you raised 3 issues we talked about, and you've touched on them briefly here. So let me just come back to them and just tell us the progress to date. You've mentioned one, crime, which is a big issue, and you said the level of violence is unacceptable a year ago. And referring to Pittsburgh and to Philadelphia, I think, as well.
Across the Commonwealth.
And across the Commonwealth.
Yes.
The fact is, Governor, a lot of folks think it is more crime today than a year ago. What do you point to specifically? You've mentioned a couple items, but what do you point to specifically that you've done to try to reduce the level of crime in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia?
Recognizing that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is one participant in this process, everybody has responsibility. Local government, state government, and federal government. I've been very clear. I think that there are a number of things we can do in the Commonwealth. Number one, we need to hire more police. And I campaigned on the idea of hiring more police, and we got the down payment on that in funding, by the way, bipartisan, bringing Democrats and Republicans together, around 400 new state troopers. We've already gotten that done, and I'm going to be coming back in my next budget and asking for more funding for police. I also recognize, and by the way, police will tell you this, they're not the only answer. And so we're also driving millions of dollars out, tens of millions of dollars out, to local on-the-ground organizations here in Pittsburgh, Philly, Harrisburg, all across Pennsylvania, for violence prevention initiatives through a church, community organization, others, especially with our young people, especially with our children. We established these funds in the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, and I charged Austin Davis, my lieutenant governor, with being the chairman of PCCD and driving those tens of millions of dollars out to community organizations that I think is going to help us combat violence. I maintain today what I said a year ago to you in my first interview as governor and what I said throughout my years as attorney general. People have a right to both be safe and feel safe. And we're going to continue to partner with local leaders like Ed Gainey and soon-to-be executive Sarah Innamorato, along with DAs and county commissioners and police chiefs all across this southwestern Pennsylvania region to address crime where we see it. The Commonwealth plays an important role, as do others, and we are doing our part.
Second issue that we talked about a year ago, and you talked during your campaign, energy.
Yes.
Very big in southwestern Pennsylvania. Natural gas. We are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, frankly, in southwestern Pennsylvania. And you had expressed your concern about the regional.
We have a lot of natural gas here. I'm not sure we want to equate ourselves to Saudi Arabia, but I take your point. I take your point. Yes.
Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI. You expressed concerns about how it could raise energy prices for consumers and could cost jobs in our building trades and the like. As you know, Commonwealth Court, this was a Wolf administration. You bear no responsibility for that. The Wolf administration proposed this. The Commonwealth Court recently struck it down, basically saying it included a tax that only the legislature can pass. You could have let it drop, but you've appealed it to the state Supreme Court, which has suggested to many that you are contrary to the campaign position you took a year ago. Is it contrary?
Not at all. In fact, I've been consistent throughout. Let me walk you through this, and let me begin by saying I view energy as a key growth opportunity for the Commonwealth. When I think about our ability to create jobs and economic opportunity, I talk about this all the time. I was just at the African American Chamber of Commerce talking about our growth strategy. It includes energy. By the way, along with life sciences and robotics and agriculture, and to name just a few. So I view energy as part of our growth strategy. I think it's a critically important way to hire more people in the building trades and to create opportunity, especially here in southwestern Pennsylvania. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is basically a cap and trade construct that Governor Wolf put in place, that opponents of it sued him over, and I inherited, as you correctly pointed out, is not something that I've been in love with, and I'll tell you why. I've been very upfront about this. Number one, I was really concerned that it would take away jobs. Number two, really concerned that it could raise prices for consumers. And number three, recognize we've got to address climate change. I question whether this was the best strategy. And you are correct, our appellate court voiced concern and struck it down, but they struck it down actually on a more narrow question of what I view as executive power, really the power of what a governor can do, not just on energy, but on a whole host of things. And so I made very clear in my statement, I made 2 points. Number one, I was really forced to appeal to protect the prerogative of the executive. But number two, and this is the first time that this has been said publicly by a governor, let alone a Democratic governor, I'm prepared to take us out of RGGI. I'm prepared to sign legislation that takes us away from RGGI, something my predecessor put in place, and I've convened a working group made up of environmentalists, tradespeople from labor unions, industry leaders, and consumer groups who have all come together and have all embraced a cap and invest system, but they want to see that be a Pennsylvania-centric system. And so I said to lawmakers, I know you all have been yelling about this, but you haven't actually done anything on it. Send me a Pennsylvania-based cap and invest system that has the support of Republicans and Democrats, has the support of industry and labor, and I'll not only sign that, I'll remove us from RGGI. So yeah, I appealed because you got to protect the prerogative of the executive. By the way, long after I'm gone as governor, the next executive needs that power. But I've also said something that my predecessor never said, which is I'll sign a bill taking us out of RGGI, but it's got to actually hit my desk. So you can have lawmakers chirping in the background, but they've got a responsibility now to act, to actually go and do the hard work instead of just complaining about this situation, and send a bill to my desk that has broad bipartisan support, that protects jobs and protects consumers, and I'll sign it, and that'll remove us from RGGI.
A couple final questions I wanted to ask you about, Governor. As you know, we're really about to enter kind of a new era in both Philadelphia County and Allegheny County with the first women elected to the top executive positions. Sarah Amado as Allegheny County Executive and Sherelle Parker as the Mayor of Philadelphia.
100th mayor.
100th Mayor, yes, indeed. Let me ask you about Sarah Amado, because she only won by 8,000 votes. It was a very close election. And many attribute your advertisement, your campaign ad, as helping to put her over the top. There are some concerns, because she comes from the left wing of the Democratic Party, that she will not be listening to the building trades folks or to more moderate Democrats and others, and not govern from the middle like you do, but be more inclined to govern from the left. What's your relationship with County Executive-elect Amado, and do you worry about the direction Allegheny County may go?
We have a strong relationship. I'm incredibly pleased by her victory, and I was proud to support her. And I think she's going to take Allegheny County in a positive direction, building on the great work Rich Fitzgerald has done over a dozen years. And what I've seen, by the way, just from her transition process, is professionalism, organization, bringing in voices from all across the political spectrum, hiring really talented people who are going to help her do an effective job for the good people of Allegheny County. Relative to my involvement in supporting her candidacy, look, I'm someone who believes we've got to broaden out our political process and bring more voices in who have historically been shut out. And I view that as part of my responsibility, particularly my responsibility as the leader of the Democratic Party. And so I was proud to support Sherelle Parker, the first woman mayor of Philadelphia, and proud to support Sarah Amado, the first woman executive here in Allegheny County. And I think that is a continuation of my efforts over the years to elevate voices that historically haven't had a shot. Austin Davis is another example of that, the first black lieutenant governor here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who's doing an incredible job and who was the exact right pick, but a voice who might not have otherwise had the opportunity to compete statewide. I view that as part of my responsibility, and it's one that I think makes our politics stronger and works for the betterment of the good people of Pennsylvania.
Mayor-elect Parker has just named a former deputy commissioner of police as the new commissioner, Kevin Bethl. What's your view of that?
Well, first off, I think the mayor-elect went through a really thoughtful process. And that should tell the good people of Philadelphia something, which is that she knows how to put a process in place and then execute on a decision, and an effective decision in this case. I think Kevin Bethl is an outstanding choice. He's someone I worked with as Attorney General when he did a lot of work in the juvenile space, in the Philadelphia school space. He's homegrown and someone who knows Philadelphia well. And he's also someone who understands how important, as the mayor-elect does, to work together with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to support their initiatives when it comes to public safety. Sherelle Parker has a view like I do on law and order, that we've got to make sure that we have adequate policing in our communities. We've got to make sure that people are safe. And I look forward to working, obviously, with her, but also with her police commissioner. My commissioner of the state police, Colonel Christopher Paris, is already engaging with the commissioner-designate in the city of Philadelphia, and we're going to find ways that we can work effectively together.
Governor, final question on an issue that I think is very sensitive to a lot of us, including yourself and to me. Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia.
Yeah.
Both have affected my two alma maters that are in your hometown, Haverford College and the University of Pennsylvania. As you know, at Haverford, a young Palestinian student, Kenan Abdelhalben, was shot in Vermont. He was one of the 3 Palestinians shot. And I believe as we're speaking, there have been protests on the Haverford campus suggesting the administration has not done enough to support the Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab students on campus. At the same time, at another alma mater of mine, the University of Pennsylvania, the university president has been criticized by you and others for not clearly stating that calls for genocide of the Jewish people are anti-Semitic and must always be condemned. I wanted to ask you, there is a balance between free speech and urging violence against people.
Of course.
And where do you draw the line? How do you see Pennsylvania colleges, campuses, and just people in general who have every right to protest? Where do you see those lines being drawn?
I think we have to acknowledge that this is a challenging moment for so many people. The rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, particularly when we see a rise in anti-Semitism here in Pittsburgh, which of course was the site just over 5 years ago of the deadliest act of anti-Semitism in our nation's history. And we need to state clearly that there is no place for that. No place for anti-Semitism, no place for Islamophobia, and we certainly do not want to see it rise here in Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia, or any place in between. I think leaders have a responsibility to speak and act with moral clarity, and I have tried to do that, to call out hate or threats of violence wherever I see it, no matter who it was against. On the steps of the state capitol just a few weeks ago, there was a peaceful protest of Palestinians protesting Israeli policy in the Middle East, and it was a peaceful demonstration. By the way, they said some things I disagreed with, but I certainly would do everything in my power to support their right to have that protest. And yet when that protest ended and some of the demonstrators began to walk away, someone showed up at the Capitol and brandished a weapon and shouted, insensitive, hateful things in their direction. I condemn that. And I'm glad that that individual was charged with an ethnic intimidation criminal statute violation. We have no place for that in Pennsylvania. In the place that Penn founded on the idea of religious tolerance, on the idea of welcoming all, no matter what you look like or where you come from, who you love or who you pray to, everyone should feel safe here. And I feel as though I have a responsibility, now sitting in the chair that Penn once sat in, to continue that important work to make sure that everyone can feel safe here. And so to come back to the heart of your question, we need to make sure Pennsylvania is a place where you can have that freedom of speech, where you can have that ability to march down the street here in Pittsburgh, Philly, places in between, and make sure your voice is heard whether I agree or disagree. Where does it cross a line? When you're threatening others, when you're making people feel unsafe, when you're brandishing weapons, when you're doing things that purposely damage property or purposely put people at risk. That's unacceptable. And that is where we need leaders, law enforcement officials, and others to stop that in its tracks. Whether you're a student at one of your alma maters or anywhere else, we have a responsibility to make sure that the community is heard and that they feel safe. And I must say, we've had some great examples of that across Pennsylvania, particularly on our campuses. The work that Neely Bendapudi is doing at Penn State, that Farnan Jahanian is doing at Carnegie Mellon, just to name two, and there are many others, Joan Gable at Pitt. That work is helping make sure students can be heard, the community can be heard, but then in hearing them, folks can feel safe at the same time. And it's a delicate balance, and it's not easy, and leaders don't always get it right, but I think as long as a leader is speaking and acting with moral clarity, you're going to get it right a lot more than not.
You're going to a menorah lighting, I believe, the University of Pennsylvania later this evening.
I am.
Speaking to students there. Is this the message you intend to convey?
It is. And, you know, Hanukkah is a festival of lights. And out of darkness, light was able to be found. And I think this is a moment for all of our challenges, not just here in Pennsylvania, but across the country and really across the globe. The division that we see, the hate that is being shared online and in person. This is a moment where we need to find light in the midst of that darkness. And I'm going to say that at Penn. I'm going to say that in communities all across Pennsylvania consistently as I have. And I'm going to work with other community leaders in academia, in politics, in law enforcement, in the media and elsewhere to make sure that we are all working together in the spirit of William Penn to find light in the midst of darkness.
Governor Josh Shapiro, always a pleasure to be with you, sir. Thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.